Hello, this is Mikk Weekly back with another video. This time I'm seeing if a 3-year-old iPhone can still stand up to the latest and best. What we have here is the 2013 4-inch iPhone 5S. Costing only $150 on some wireless networks, this might be a good first phone choice for children or teens, or even those who just want a cheaper smartphone, but is it worth it? Let's start off with the design. Like many others, I think the iPhone 5, 5S, and SE are the absolute best looking phones Apple's ever made. Not to say that 6, 6S, and 7 are necessarily ugly, I just don't think they have the same class that the iPhone 5S does. With the chamfered edged aluminum back with the colored matched glass on top and bottom, the high quality glass display, and of course the extremely well built buttons and cameras, it's very obvious that this is a very high end smartphone even for now, let alone in 2013. With the design, let's also go over the elephant in the room, the display. The iPhone 5S has a Retina 1136x640 4-inch display with a pixel density of 326 pixels per inch. This display for most will just be too tiny. I don't have huge hands or anything, but the phone still seems to get swallowed up in my hands whenever I hold it. This is obviously a deal breaker for some. Having tinkered and used the phone for about a week now, I'm actually used to the screen size. While bigger screens do seem a bit more immersive, the iPhone 5S display is still more than usable for me. With the design out of the way, let's go over hardware and specs. The iPhone 5S has an Apple dual-core A7 chip with M7 Motion co-processing clocked at 1.3 GHz with 1 GB of memory. While this may not seem very good at all, Apple's devices are so well optimized for iOS that the iPhone 5S actually performs better than certain Android devices with better specs. With a 3-year-old processing power, you may not think this iPhone would be able to game very well. Well, you're kinda right. It can play almost any game you throw at it, but it just likes to heat up. I was playing a game called Pac-Man 256, which isn't a very CPU or graphics intensive game, mind you, but the phone still heats up quite a bit. It never gets uncomfortable, but it is very noticeable how warm it gets. On Geekbench 4, I got a multi-core score of 2,132 compared to the newer iPhone SE's 4,200, being almost double the iPhone 5S. If we look at an iPhone 6, we can still see a boost in performance with a score of 2,614. Fortunately for iPhone 5S, these scores don't mean much if they don't work in actual use. The iPhone 5S still runs the majority of apps and games very smoothly. Other than the iPhone heating up a bit during gaming, it's a surprisingly still very capable iPhone. Next, let's go to the camera. The iPhone 5S is using an 8 megapixel rear shooter with an f2.2 aperture. Remember, megapixels do not mean a great camera. There are countless factors that are just as important as megapixels that can make or break a camera. I found that the rear shooter is good. Because it is a 3-year-old smartphone, it never necessarily blew me away, but there were some shots that did turn out better than expected. The HDR feature definitely did show a difference between a normal shot and highlights and shadows. Compared to an SE, which is a smartphone with the same form factor but only 1-year-old internals, you can definitely see that Apple has improved greatly with their cameras. As for video recording, the iPhone 5S can shoot in full 1080p at 30 FPS and 720p and up to 120 FPS for slow motion shots. The iPhone 5S does not have optical image stabilization. Again, I have found recording abilities to be good, but it can't shoot in 4K like the newer SE can. But most of the individuals in the market for this phone want a cheaper alternative to the SE, but also want the same iOS experience. 1080p is by no means bad quality. It still looks sharp and the colors are a bit on the warm side, but that's expected by Apple devices. The slow motion feature still looks good with 720p with playback being at 30 FPS. Slow motion is a feature I don't see in many smartphones and is pretty fun to use. The camera is also the first from Apple to receive True Tone Flash, a feature that sees the warmth of light in a shot and then produces the most accurate tone of flash to make low light shot look as natural as possible. Let's move to connectivity. The iPhone 5S is fully up to date at the time of this recording with iOS 10.2. It can do almost everything a new iPhone can except for a few key things. One of the biggest things this iPhone is lacking is NFC for Apple Pay. You won't be able to use your iPhone as a debit or credit card. Another thing this iPhone is lacking is water resistance, so you'll need to either buy a waterproof case or just be careful with it around water. The Retina display to me looks sharp enough. I'm not able to see any individual pixels, and photos and video looks good on the display. Newer displays would of course look better, but this is by no means a bad display. The one turnoff of course is how small it is. This iPhone does have Touch ID, but it is an older version. There isn't too much of a difference between the speed of the iPhone 5S and the 7, but it is noticeable. It shouldn't be a deal breaker though, because it still is very fast. One thing to know, however, is to get the iPhone at that price, $150 USD, you have to get the 16GB model. With how much media people produce and consume nowadays, 16 gigs might just not be enough for some people. And one last thing to note. This is the last iPhone that Apple produced that could stand up on its own. Just saying. Shooting video of this standing up is really easy. For the later iPhones I have to get a salt shaker just to keep them up. Pretty inconvenient. Anyway, overall, if you want a budget alternative to a $600+ USD smartphone but still would like to have the experience of iOS, this is a great deal. It's still powerful enough to handle the majority, if not all, of the apps on the App Store. The biggest downside of the phone is that small screen. This would be the perfect device for a teen or a child as their first phone. It could also be a great phone for someone who's just on a budget. The build quality is phenomenal, and the operating system for some is very familiar. I would surely make sure to check out the iPhone 5S. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below and I'll make sure to get back to you as soon as I can. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more Pixel Weekly.